and moving the meeting from last week to this week. I greatly appreciate it. It allowed me to take some time off. So thank you all. Justin, do you want to lead us off? So I guess we would have to approve the agenda first, right? Let me go to the first page of the agenda.
Yeah, we'll let you start. I think we have one or two items right before the item that I have to present.
Perfect. And it looks like we have the call to order. So we'll call the meeting to order. Brenda, there's no public. I don't think we have any public comment.
No, we don't have any public comment. And the first item we have is minutes, approving the minutes of the March 8th, 2021 Finance and Administration Committee meeting.
Perfect.
Oh, I see that Director Weiner has his hand raised.
Harry?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a slight change in the minutes regarding what we agreed to for, we were given like 5 choices for how to structure the rate changes. And the difference between what I recall and what the minutes say is, if I can find them again. Oh, I just have the purchasing policy. Oh, here they are. It says the the committee requested smaller increases for the sewer rate charges over a longer period of time. I think more exactly, we requested smaller increases going to larger increases would be a more accurate way of framing that, because that was the choice we were given, to have have the rates go from smaller to larger, and the time period was predetermined by all of the choices we had. And that's the only change I have to the minutes.
Okay, noted.
All right. Thank you, Harry. Do you want to make a motion to approve them with your changes?
Okay, if that's required, I'd so move.
And second, and I don't think we need a vote. So
Yeah.
Minutes passed.
Okay. Next item, item 2, policy. Review the proposed updates to the purchasing policy.
Okay. All right. Vice President Cepeda and Director Weiner, I'll get this item started. So what I'll do is just give you an overview of kind of the pieces of the updated purchasing policy, the items that we've changed, and just give you a brief overview of what the policy is, and then we can go into more detail if you maybe has additional questions. But so generally speaking, we currently have a purchasing policy, and so this is the version that was in your packet. That is our update. We just thought it was easier instead of doing a track changes, because there were quite a few areas that were added within the purchasing policy that we wanted to just have a clean draft to present to the committee, and then ultimately to the board. Quite a few just overview of the items. We are separating in the current purchasing policy. There's quite a few areas that we would call a procedural, that are that explain how to do things, and so some of those items we removed out of this current purchasing policy. There are in this current one, we really focused on trying to make it clearer, also for the board and for the staff, about the different purchasing authorities and guidelines for the different types of procurement. So if we just start off from the very beginning, the reason for the policy, we've added several sections about ethical procurement. We've expanded it from what the current purchasing policy has. And so there are several items related to, really keeping an arm's length distance from anybody who's involved in procurement, to keep an arm's length distance from any of the potential vendors or contractors that would be doing business, just to make sure that we're getting the best value for the district. There are a couple items in there that are related to, since the board has taken several actions over the last year and a half or so related to the California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act. As a district, we have joined that act, that those purchasing guidelines for smaller public construction projects. And so we've added that language within this document. We have also specified methods of procurement that weren't in the previous one. So we've broken it down. There's essentially 3 types of procurement within this policy. So there is procurement for equipment, supplies, and materials. And then we've broken it down into by cost. So if anything under $25,000, there's some certain guidelines to follow about the procurement. If it's between $25,000 and $50,000, there's some additional ways that we're looking to find the best value at the lowest cost. And then for purchases over $50,000. And so we have that broken out into the essentially 3 methods of procurement. So we have the first one mentioned here is equipment, materials, and supplies. The second one is for services. So that also includes professional services. There is a section in there, there's an existing law that's related to how we select professional services such as architects, professional engineers, project managers, construction managers. We have to use a qualification basis selection process for those types of services, and we cannot use price for those types of professional services that we use really for a lot of design and construction management. But each of the ones, and then the other one is the detail related to the construction contracts that fall under the public contract code. And so we've split it out. Hopefully this version makes it a little bit more clear or what the different limits are. It also specifies the general manager purchasing authority, which the board has adopted several months ago in an updated resolution. So this is also putting that within this particular policy document. So in general, it's the general manager purchasing authority is as it currently stands. We're not making any changes. It's for per vendor per fiscal year for operating supplies, it's $50,000. For professional services in capital projects, it's up to $75,000. And then anything over that threshold needs to go to the board of directors for approval. And then for the projects, the public construction projects that are under what I'm calling is CUPCA, which is the California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act, which is this section C here, specifies what the dollar thresholds are currently, and the current resolution is authorizing the general manager to enter into contracts at those values and then there's specific procedures, bidding procedures that staff will have to follow related to this act. So I mean, that is our updated purchasing policy. We've just added more specification. We've clarified different areas from what our current policy says, and just happy to answer any questions or how we want to. I'd like to go through this policy update.
Thank you, Justin, for that. Director Weiner, do you have any questions or comments? I guess we can, if you have anything in particular, we can go to that page, maybe go page by page. There's 15 pages, but hopefully we don't have questions on all of them.
I don't have questions on all of the pages. Justin answered half the questions that I had before we began, so I'm not going to ask those. One thing I would like to see included is that if we have a financial, if the district ever has a problem fiscally, I would like to see language that says the board may review and reject any purchase of any price if it declares a fiscal emergency. So that when in unusual times, the board still can review every dollar being spent, since the board is responsible for the fiscal health of the district.
Harry,
Yes.
sorry, can you clarify that a little more to me? Do you mean standing contracts or bids that are out there for?
Well, there was all, there's, we broke out in our policy, there's spending limits defined. You know, and the amount of, let's see, the amount of spending is, you know, it's reasonable to assume that we don't need to be on the hook to pass off everything $50,000 or under, or for those particular reasons that they put in here, $25,000 and to $50,000. So there's no reason for us to weigh in on that, except if there's a fiscal emergency. I would like the board to have the power to review them all at any level they choose. And they can only do that if they declare a fiscal emergency. So if for whatever reason, you know, the dollar becomes worthless and the board, you know, really has no money, a fiscal emergency, an unusual event, then I'd like the board to be able to weigh in on any spending to see if they could save the district in any way possible. That's kind of what I have in mind.
Chair Sebeda, can I just make one comment here?
Yeah,
Sure.
please.
I mean, we do have a few other policies that are helping to get us to the point where we probably, hopefully we don't ever get to that fiscal, you know, emergency part. Like as the reserve policy the board has recently approved, that we are getting ourselves in line so that there will be hopefully sufficient warning, you know, that to bring back to the board about anything that may happen. There is the budget that is adopted on by the board every year. So it's not saying we cannot add this. I don't know legally if that's something we can or cannot add. I'm just saying that we do have quite a few other policies and mechanisms that hopefully would get us to the point where we wouldn't be running out of cash so frequent, you know, so quickly necessarily.
I would like to say that if we look around the public agency landscape, the view is pretty terrible. And while I believe we are currently being managed very well, and that financially we have no risk, I just would like to have future boards have the option to declare a fiscal emergency and review spending. And I don't think that should be controversial. This has nothing to do with our current situation, nor does it have anything to do with the likelihood over the next 5 or 10 years. However, as I look out on, again, as I look out on the landscape of public agencies and particularly those that do infrastructure, I see them being privatized because they're incapable of raising enough money to do their work. And I don't want to see this district have a future of privatization because of some calamity that they had that none of us had any, or previous boards or past boards or any boards of this agency had any responsibility for, but are pretty common throughout. So that's
Director,
the,
can we maybe ask Ms. Collins to opine and see, because is that something that we can either put on there, or is that something that at any given time, the board can say, stop all spending, bring it all back, every single dollar, every single penny, doesn't matter what procurement things we have out there, or do we need it in writing? Director Wiener.
Yeah. Great points. So the first thing is, yes, you can do it either way. I want to say two things. So the first is, yes, you could either, at the time that you have a fiscal emergency, you have an emergency meeting, you declare all of the other policies sort of on hold because you got to deal with the fiscal emergency. But it sounds to me like what Director Wiener is also saying is it would be just nice to sort of plan for that, unfortunate situation and have a paragraph or something in here, which I think is in general is fine. It's the details, and that's the other point that I wanted to point out. The details do matter. We are bound no matter what by the California and the federal prompt payment laws. So we still have to pay some people some things that we've already contracted for, and we don't have a choice. And we would violate any number of our SRF loans and other things if were we to do that. So I think that sort of we could insert language into the purchasing policy that said something like, subject to state and federal law, in the event the board declares a fiscal emergency, expenditures will be suspended pending the board's review and line item approval of each expenditure. Would that meet your needs, Director Wiener?
I'm not even talking about spending, I'm talking about future procurement. So that what we have is a situation where we say that the board needn't review certain classification of spending, those be, future spending, potential procurement. We don't even need to worry about them. They don't have to come before the board. The staff can decide what they need to buy, and they buy it up to X amount of dollars. And all I'm saying is that while that currently makes a lot of sense and we have no concerns about it, we should have a paragraph in there, as you said, that just says, if the board declares a fiscal emergency, then they may review all future procurements, regardless of classification or.
Right. So so again, back to Director Zepeda's point is you could always do that with an emergency declaration, with or without it being in this policy. But if we want to put it in this policy, I guess I'm not clear, because to me, procurement, in the way you're talking about it, is the solicitation and award of a contract, whether it's for supplies, equipment, or materials, or whether it's for services, or whether it's for public works contracts. That's procurement to me. Versus if we're in a fiscal emergency, it sounded to me like you were concerned about also spending. So no, you're not. It's really about the solicitation and award of any contract.
Yeah, so we review, if we're facing some financial problems, we review not just everything over $250,000, but we review everything. As the policy states, we don't review it, anything, any procurement less than 250, right? As I read it.
No, it depends on the category. So you still, for certain types of procurements, it still goes to the board down to the $50,000 level, right, Justin? And so there's certain types of things that you're buying or paying for that it still goes to the board if it's $50,001. For construction procurement, it can go up to $200,000 before it goes to the board. So one of the dangers we have with reviewing every single procurement is, do you want to deal with like the petty cash purchases of batteries?
I'm saying only if the board declares a fiscal emergency.
I understand, but if I'm going to draft this for you, I want to make sure that I'm clear, because the petty cash purchases, let's say it's a fiscal emergency, would you like to see the language written in such a way that the board would also approve like what we call the micro procurement, so that items under $25,000?
I mean, in a fiscal emergency, we'd want to review everything, right? We want to keep the business going as best we could, but we want to, maximize our use of our dollars. I'm sorry, I don't see why this is controversial or how
Oh, I don't think it's controversial. It's a matter of scope, because what if we draft it in such a way that even micro procurements are subject to board approval, then we would have to convene 5 members of the board to meet when we wanted to buy batteries. You know, they would have to basically pre-order a list of procurements, including things that are $5 or $10 or $100, and they would go on a list. And if you want that level of granularity, we can build that. I'm just not sure if you want that level of granularity or you only want purchases over an X dollar to come back to the board in an emergency.
Yeah, I think the board needs to concern itself with every dollar in the kind of emergency that I'm thinking of. So I
Okay,
don't,
so
I don't
you would-
think categorizing it is useful. I think that, you know, nickels add up to dollars and pennies add up to nickels. And I think that the board needs to like say, okay, this whole area of spending, we have to defer. And if that includes, you know, 5 cents to 25,000, then so be it.
Okay, and that would only be on new contracts, so new purchases, not on existing contracts.
Just so that we have an emergency authority to review all district spending.
And it's procurement, right? So it's not current spending. So if we have a contract with, and I'm just
No,
making
procurement. No, obviously procurement.
So future procurement. So we have a contract with Staples, I'm just making up Staples, you know, and we purchase with them monthly batteries, to use Ms. Collins' analogy there, right? We're using, so we don't want to look at batteries that we're getting from Staples because we have a contract with them already that we're going to spend $50,000 a month. But
Yeah,
now,
well, I think we'd have to ask the GM to renegotiate or discuss or try to save the district money. You know, what I'm talking about is that's not for the procurement policy, right?
Yes,
That's
I-
another thing.
Well,
Yes,
I'm confused.
forward, right? Ms. Collins and Justin, right? Procurement, what we're looking at now is things that we're going to purchase forward, not things that we have now. Right, so
But contract
we're looking at-
administration, right, so what I'm confused about then is then in the middle of contract administration, so let's say we've already awarded a contract for X, and it's $1 million contract, and we already have we're already 500 grand in, and we've got 500 left to pay. The remainder of the contract, I wouldn't call procurement, I would just call it spending. And so my question here is, are we suspending, or are we asking for the board's permission? I mean, because the board can rescind its permission. It's just that you've got a problem with the contract clause of the Constitution. You don't want to, you know, interrupt your contract necessarily. So earlier you had made a distinction between spending and procurement. And so I think it's the same question you're asking Chair Zepeda is, are we talking about go forward, or are we talking about contracts we're already in the middle of?
Yeah, I'm talking about what Director Zepeda said.
going forward.
Going forward.
Okay, so new procurement.
That's my view of procurement. I guess you guys have a broader view of procurement, which is beginning to end of purchase.
Because Director Wiener, if I can add, I think you're going somewhere that is very interesting. I had not thought about that, right? If we're in the middle of a financial crisis and we have, you know, we want to build a brand new swimming pool, right? And we're $500,000 into it, and we have $500,000 more for it. Do we want to say, okay, stop it, because maybe we don't really need that swimming pool anymore, right? Let's stop it until we get some more money. That's a current purchasing something. That's something that was approved last year or 2 years ago, right? And is going on right now. You don't want to look at that. You want to look at us having a conversation about building a pool next year.
Correct.
Ms. Collins, are we able to write something in here that would mention that the board has the authority to, it's not going to stop the battery purchasing, right? Unless we're going to be going into a contract with Staples for $25,000 or whatever it may be. So I'm saying the board can convene to relook at procurement contracts not already awarded of an amount.
Of any amount. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
not any amount, but maybe the board, once the board meets, they can say, okay, let's look at this. How much are we off in our budget? Do we really want to look at every penny, or do we want to look at every dollar? And I know that every penny adds up, right? But I think that do we want to limit, do we want to put such restrictive wording in here? And maybe future boards might say, you know what, actually, let's not do every penny. I want to just look at every dollar.
I don't even want to I don't want to put any specifics other than that the board has the authority if and only if it declares a fiscal emergency to review any future procurement, no matter what the price. I guess that's the simplest way to put it.
And maybe instead of any price, we have, Director Reno, will you be okay with some other verbiage that gives, again, the board the say of saying we want to look at anything over $1,000?
Yeah, I don't even want to specify. I'll let the
Can
board
we say
decide.
any? Because to me, when you say any, it's every penny, right? That battery was 5 cents. Let's look at that battery.
Yeah, I just didn't want it restricted.
Okay.
You know, if, because we don't have categories that go down to, you know, we don't have a category that's from 0 to 100. It's 0 to 50K. 50K is a lot if you're looking to scratch out any penny as a board member.
So Ms. Collins, would we be able to write something that's not restrictive on either side, that we're not putting a dollar amount, but it also gives future boards the say of saying, we want to look at this, and then they can give a number then?
Yeah, future boards always have that option. So I want to be clear that we're not preventing the board. The board is entitled at a, regularly noticed public meeting to rescind its delegation of authority to the general manager at any time. So that can happen at a meeting, or we can write a piece of that into this. What I would like to recommend that you be careful about is not interrupting existing awarded contracts, because if we have language like that, then that will potentially compromise. Contractors won't necessarily have as much faith in us. So I like this idea that we're really just talking about future solicitations and awards. And we do not have to be specific as to the level, whether it's micro procurement all the way up through, multi-million-dollar construction contracts. So I think that's easy enough, and we can draft that before the board meeting.
Great.
Thank you. Director Wiener, any other comments, questions on?
There were exceptions. There were exceptions in the first two purchasing authority types, A and B, and they said that there was something like if we get a non-response, uh-oh, am I here?
Yep, you're there. Brenda, somebody's showing the agenda.
So let's see.
I think it's next page. Whoever's reading
Yeah,
this.
I've got a specific page. I mean, and item number.
I'm looking at like page
3, item 3,
Oh.
and item 2A5. Oh no, this is a different question. So, yeah, but there's, oh yeah, 2A5 and 2B5 are what I'm referring to. And they are like these weird exceptions where we reject all bids and or we receive no bids and there's emergencies. And I'm curious to know if the board is, I think the board should be the authority who approves of, if we go into these exceptions, that the board should be weighing in on doing. So I'm not sure if the purchasing policy is excluding the board or if there's ambiguity about who will make the decision to do these two different exceptions.
I could jump in for a minute. So the board approval authority is still in existence. So if it's over $50,000 and it's one of these categories, it will still need to go to the board of directors for approval. What this section 5 is really talking about is that if staff, we went out regardless of the amount, so it's really those items. It could be, if it's under 50,000 or if it's over 50,000, that if we went out and then there was no response, we still need the work to get done. And so there's two pieces, right? The A is if we get responses and we reject them all because they're not, they didn't respond in a way that showed that this is what, they understood what we needed, or they weren't giving us the product exactly as we specified. Or there was a proposal and nobody responded. Then we still need to get that work done, or we still need to purchase that supply. And so this has given us the ability to continue to find a way to purchase that equipment, material supply, or to get that service that we need. But if the dollar threshold still stands under this term, so if it's over 50,000 and we went through this route, we would still need to go to the board to get authorization for that contract.
Okay, that would be my only concern about those. And then there was item 3, page 3. Could you explain the practical implications?
Director, before we move on that one, can I make a comment? Because I actually had a similar comment to yours on that same item. Before we move on, do you mind if I make my comment?
Oh, please.
Okay.
Please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, just so that I could add, maybe if Justin can let me know if we can add something here. Because when I read section 5A there, that we reject all the bids, and maybe I'm not reading it correctly, but are we able to add something there that says not meeting the requirements? And I don't know if that already says that, and I'm just not understanding it correctly, but it says if WCW rejects all bids received in connection with the procurement requiring formal competitive bidding, and I'm just saying if they're not meeting their requirements.
It really would fall onto, as on the staff side to make sure that our specifications were laid out correctly, because it'd be under that circumstance that what we specified we needed this vendor contractor to do or to provide, and they were not able to provide that. Nobody who submitted a proposal was able to meet the specifications of our of what we were looking for, and it would be in those situations. I think this is, soliciting formal written proposals. I think that's where it talks about what the specifications are. It's not in the detail in the policy. That's something that we would address more in the staff level procedural manual about what kind of detail we're going to need to put into our when we're asking for a purchase of equipment or the supply that we're specifying what we really need.
So how I read it, you can reject all the bids received in connection with that procurement requiring formal competitive bidding. So we bid it out, and maybe they've come in and we don't know that we're good or not. We don't know if they met the requirements, but you can just reject all of them. Right. And what I'm saying is, should we be adding something here that says that we are rejecting them because they did not meet the requirement, whatever the requirements may be?
Vice President Takeda, can I actually address this question? So
Yeah,
I'd like to I do want to reiterate what Justin said, and also just kind of as an overall our approach to the policies is that one thing that a lot of our policies had was that they were not actually high-level policy guidelines. They were more procedural. And what we have attempted to do in our rewriting of many of these things is to keep it at an appropriate level for policy and not procedural. So when we have a written solicitation, there's very detailed criteria that's included in the solicitation that lists, all of the factors that we would be considering. So you're not going to, so I'd really ask that the board not add that, because that's again getting into something very procedural, and we're not going to just, if the concern is not just going to say, hey, we don't like, these companies because we don't like that their logo is blue. That's not going to happen. There's a committee, there is a formal criteria that is used. We fill out, we sit down and go through a formal process. So the only reason I'm bringing it up again is because we really like to keep our policies at that high level and not get into such detailed procedural. And I know it's one word, so it probably doesn't feel that procedural to you, but it is kind of our overall approach. And I just wanted to reiterate that and explain that a little bit further. So.
Thank you, Lisa. Then with that explanation, then I see what you're saying about the high level and the two different words there. So thank you for that. I'm fine then. I'll pull back my comment on that one. So Director Wiener, do you want to go ahead and with your next comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand the page 3, item 3, the practical implication of that clause.
I'm sorry, could you direct us to which clause you're talking about again, Director?
Page 3, you're looking at it. It's the bottom 3 on
Item
page
3.
3.
So can you restate kind of what the question is related to this particular item?
Yeah, I wanted to understand the practical implication of this clause.
I'm sorry, of which clause, Director Wiener? Of all of section 3?
No. This one right before us, for purchase of equipment, materials. It's on page 3 and it begins for purchase of equipment, materials and supplies with an estimated expenditure of greater than $50,000. The contract administrator will solicit formal written bids and award to the lowest responsible bidder unless it is determined to be in the best interest of WCW to solicit formal written proposals and to,
Yeah, okay, best value. Are you trying to talk about what's best value versus lowest price?
I just didn't understand it. And I was asking for an explanation that I could understand.
Okay, so let me try this, and then Justin, if I miss anything, please correct me. So in general, our standard is the lowest responsible bidder. That's a term of art that we use, lowest meaning the lowest priced, responsive meaning that they adequately respond to the solicitation so that they sort of check all the boxes and provide all the necessary information. And then responsible often applies in the case of ensuring that they have the appropriate types of either insurance or surety bonds or other indicia of their what we call responsibility in the public works world. Those are typically the three requirements, and this is the requirement by law that we award when we're doing bidding for public works contracts. Lowest responsive bidder is our legal requirement. However, in some situations, best value is more appropriate. So for example, for when we're talking about equipment, materials, and supplies, there is some equipment, for example, that we believe provides better value. It may be more expensive, but it is more reliable, for example. So it's sort of the difference between buying a Yugo and buying a Honda. One of them has indicia of reliability and will provide better value to the district. Even though the Yugo is cheaper, it has a history of breaking down, and therefore that's not the type of equipment we want. And in those situations, we may want to have a best value solicitation as opposed to a lowest responsive bid.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
And I can also give you an example of that. We had, I've had examples where we bought equipment like shredding equipment and they were unable to meet the throughput requirement. So we wanted it to, shred a bunch of stuff by, X number of tons per hour, and they couldn't demonstrate their ability to get that done. And so it wasn't the best value. Or in some cases, we may be seeking some type of supply in a, tonnage and, 1 ton of X type lasts longer than 1 ton of Y type. That would be better value.
Even though it doesn't meet the 3 minimum requirements.
No, I'm sorry. It's you either choose one standard to evaluate it on, or you choose the other standard. You either choose best value or you choose lowest responsible.
I see. Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Director Wiener. I have just a couple here. Some of them have already been answered. Are we able to add the word, so I'm on page 3 is fine here as well, but cumulatively, so that we know that it's in where there's 25,000 or whatever the dollar amounts may be, but they're for whatever item or project we're working on, so that we're not piecing it out. So we're not saying we're gonna, if we buy this machine but we get the wheels separately, now we're under this threshold, we'll buy the wheels separate. Can we?
There is a section in the policy that already addresses not to split the purchases. Because if we're dealing with the same vendor, to avoid certain, procedures or certain rules, I think that one is already addressed. I have to look at the exact section that it is.
And
you'll see that is our practice, that sometimes you'll see that we come back to the board with an amendment because we've already spent under the general manager authority in that fiscal year. So then we'll come back to the board and say we would like to amend it, but we've hit that threshold. So as Justin said, there is language in the policy about splitting purchases, specifically with the intent of trying to go around the system. So we have that built into the policy.
Can I just direct your attention to actually page 6, item D? That is the specific portion that says splitting of purchases prohibited, and that we will not arbitrarily split purchases into smaller segments or partial orders to remain below the authorized dollar threshold.
Thank you for that. I missed that one. Thank you. Thank you, Claire. All right, my next one, let me just look at my notes here. Under services, or actually it may fall under all of them, is this where we would add the time frame of contracts? I know that, like we went out for our legal services, and then we came back and we said, we're going to do, I believe it was a 3 or 5 year contract. Is this where we would add a time frame for all of our contracts, or where would be the right location for that?
So contracts, a time frame would only apply to contracts for services. It wouldn't apply necessarily to contracts for supplies, equipment, and materials, or to construction. And I think that when we talk about, let's see, services.
And there was that list that we had created, or actually the staff created, that was really helpful, that showed, all of our vendors from legal to copy machine person. And then it listed out Evergreen. So I'm getting back to the Evergreen, right? We don't want to have any more Evergreen. I know we discussed it before. I believe we might have put that under a different either policy, maybe we just talked about it.
We actually, you're right. The board actually adopted something and we probably did not include it in here. So we need to go back and make sure that's in there, and that was absolutely the desire, that there were no evergreen contracts. And I believe that the board expressed wanting contracts to not be in excess of 3 years. There could be 2 one-year options, but contracts should not go more than 5 years. So we'll go back and look at the action that the board took and make sure that that's included in this version, so that that's presented to the board. Because you're absolutely right, that was part of the action, and we said that once we updated the purchasing policy, that would be included, those components.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. And I also want to make sure that if we're paying commission, that we are also looking at that as a cumulative, right? Any spending that we have towards anything should be the time frame of 3 to 5 years. So thank you, Lisa, for that.
Yes. It would apply to all contracts that are services, where we can.
Perfect. Yeah. Under services, page 4, and then under page 5 for public projects, should we or not mention the PLA? Does the PLA go somewhere in here because we have that threshold now?
Well, that's not as much about procurement as much as it's about labor. It does anyone I guess we could do a pointer here to it. Let me just see. Under public projects.
Yeah, page 5, yeah.
I would, sitting here and it's sort of a quick reaction. The PLA is going to be up for review in X number of years. I would say we could include a reference here to, we subject to any, restrictions under any active project labor agreement, but it does sort of stand on its own. But I hear what you're saying. We could point to it.
Yeah, I like being able to point to it, and maybe in a couple of years when it gets reviewed again, they get rid of it, and then it will be a moot point. But yeah, something that we can just reference it, so we have that as, because that is part of our purchasing, the threshold that we've set to activate the PLAs.
We can include that.
So thank you for that. And I have one small one on page 10, under surplus property. The second paragraph, second sentence, it says, which is a long sentence, under no circumstances, yada, yada, yada. Second line up, it says, or R designee. So I believe we want to remove the letter R.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so that was just a small little thing there. And then under page 11, environmentally preferable purchases, it says, seeks to ensure that the products purchased by WCW include recycled content, reduced toxicity, and increased durability. I know that the board adopted, it seems like forever now, last year, purchasing more green products. And this kind of hints towards that recycled content. But I don't know if there's more wording that we can use, right? I know that we have brought up, less plastic, less paper, so I don't know if the wording would be green or what it may be. We're going to be purchasing electric vehicles, for example. I guess that reduces toxicity to an extent. But I don't know if toxicity is referring to the chemicals we use versus like the vehicles that we're purchasing, right? Instead of, now we're trying not to buy water bottles, we're going to be refilling. Right, we're figuring out the food products we're buying, so they're more better for the environment. So I'm not sure what the wording would be of anything else, or just to make it a little bit more clear that we're being more environmentally. I guess maybe the title says that environmentally preferable purchasing, but again, I don't know if something else needs to go in there or not. I'm open to thoughts there from either one. Director Wiener?
Yeah, maybe mentioning our carbon footprint as part of environmentally preferable, reducing our carbon footprint. So if we can purchase products that reduce our carbon footprint, we could add that as an example of environmentally preferable purchasing.
Because I think we have a policy already. And I remember that some of the board voted it down when we said we were not going to have meat anymore during our dinners. Meeting dinners. I was like, wow, no.
I didn't vote it down. I just thought that would be a terrible thing. We're going to have to face the wrath of all of our employees when we tell them they can't eat meat anymore.
No, that was only for the board. That was a board policy. That wasn't for the staff. That was only for us. Because we wanted to lead by example.
I'm sorry, Cesar. I just don't want to be on the wrong side of that argument, even though I don't care if I eat meat or not.
So, Vice President Cepeda, what about if we put something in that says something that is consistent with the organization's strategic plan goals around this? Okay.
I like that. Yeah. And again, yeah, that policy, now that I remember, it was the board policy, and we're not tying it to the employees. We don't want to make the employees not eat meat. It was for the board, right?
Yes.
The board it was meant for the board to lead by example. And it wasn't a very good one since parts were voted down, but still. and that is it. That is all the comments that I have. Justin and staff, thank you so much. This was very well done. It moved us along very quickly. Thank you for being up there with our comments there. Director Weiner, do you have anything else to add to the purchasing policy?
No, none. And I want to say good catch on a couple of those items. So, Director Zepeda.
You're welcome. Then Justin or Lisa or Ms. Collins, anybody else have any other questions, comments on the policy?
No, I think we've gotten your comments and your feedback. So we have a few more areas, a couple of areas that we're going to add, and that we can prepare that. And then when it goes back to the full board, we can just highlight the areas that the committee talked about.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Is there a way, now that we are getting into the habit of having the chair and the other member of the committee sort of give a quick overview, would it be prudent to maybe get a copy? And I wrote down my notes, but I didn't write down Director Weiner's notes. Can we get a quick, and I don't know if you guys wrote it down, I should have brought this up at the beginning of the meeting. And if it's not for this one, maybe for the next one, a quick little summary of what suggestions we made, and we can say, here's the suggestions we made. We think overall is a good policy. Here's what we suggested. And that way the directors already know. Because I feel that, I don't know if this is coming back at the next meeting, and by the time next meeting comes along, I might have forgotten, which is in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I might have forgotten what suggestions we made. So so we can say we made these high level ones, so we don't have to rehash them again. Somebody says, oh, why do we have this? Just trying to speed up what we already made. So we get rid of those questions and they have them.
So one thing is, we will likely have incorporated those changes already into the policy, the high level stuff, and some of the other stuff is format stuff. So I don't know if we can maybe just send those as an email if we have them. I'm not sure if we have them but if we're incorporating them, we'll have them in the new policy. So maybe we can just send you a bullet list or something. And if you want to state that.
Are you just trying to make sure that everybody else knows that we're doing our job?
Not necessarily that, but what I'm trying to get us to is that the directors might have the same questions you and I have, so that they don't ask them again, right? We can say, look, directors, we did our job. We asked about this. If you have that question, we have the answer already. Like it's, for example, on A5, right? You asked about the bids. So since we already asked it, we have an answer. We can maybe just give the answer really quickly without drying it out, because some people like to tell a story before they ask their question, and if we can get to it, they might just say, oh, you already answered it. Perfect. I'm just trying to move us along at the meeting without having to ask the same questions from the directors, if possible.
We could also include some of that in the staff report.
Oh, that too. Again, I'm just trying to, because what I've noticed is, Director Weiner and I have some good questions or comments here. And then I can't always summarize everything we said at the beginning of the agenda item. And then some of those get asked again. And I just want to make sure that we help move that meeting faster without saying, oh, let's, we just spent almost an hour here. Let's not spend that same hour with the same questions again. If we can move us forward, done. So that's the goal. And again, we can work towards it. It doesn't have to be for next meeting, because I just gave that thought now. But we could work towards that to the next one. And next one, I'll try to make sure that I write some more notes myself so I can give that as a summary. So I'll take that as a takeaway for myself as well. So, all right, if there's no other comments on this agenda item, then we'll move us forward. We don't need to, do we need to vote on this? No, right? We're just recommending it to the board?
I would ask for a recommendation that this be presented to the board for approval, subject to the edits that you've suggested at this meeting.
Perfect. Director Weiner, what do you think?
I agree.
All right. Then let there be approval then.
Okay.
Let there be a light. Perfect. Thank you. Next would be matters from the members of the board. Anything for Director Weiner?
Nothing.
Nope, I have nothing either. And Other than, no report, but just a question, as we're getting ready to go back into the office, I don't know if this committee needs to take anything of that up for any purchasing or any directions or anything. Lisa, do you need us to help you with anything?
No, no, we're good. We're still working through what things will look like and it's not agendized, but I mean, we're, the people who have been working will continue in that same format. The people who have been working remotely will primarily continue to work remotely or some hybrid version. So those are things that we're working through, but there isn't anything that we need from the board on that. Well, if there is, we'll definitely bring that forward.
Any estimate on when we might meet as a board in person?
Well, as our general counsel advised at the last board meeting, September 30th is when the executive order stops. So we will probably have the first board meeting at that October 6th, I believe is the first meeting after that.
And can somebody remind me on what meetings we have decided we will not hold this year for vacay or catch up or whatever the...
Well, that I believe was rescinded. It used to be a January, and I can't remember if there was August or not, but at this point this year, we have too much business and too many things going on to take an actual recess in August due to all of the bond financing issues. So at this point, staff is needing all of the board meetings.
Okie dokie.
So with that, I guess we have adjournment. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you all again for your time. Have a beautiful rest of the day. We'll see you all later.
Yeah, Claire and Justin, can you guys
Bye.
stand?